Compared to last week, episode 6 of Witch Hat Atelier is a slower one. In terms of narrative, there always needs to be a calm before and after a storm. Despite this, I wouldn't say the pacing is slow or calm, but it's practical and intentional. It continually develops characters that are begging for attention while giving the break the cast needs. In the same vein, the actions and words of the characters foreshadow events that may occur or past occurrences that may come to light. Starting off with the intro to this episode, the apprentices are practicing their handiwork and craft. Agott escapes the atelier to examine one of the spells that she's working on. It's an alluring pillar of light that waves through the air. According to her, it is still imperfect and not what she wants. Within this rough minute of footage, we see a couple of things regarding my two talking points. When I say pacing is intentional, I mean to say that the atmosphere of the setting works in tandem with world building or characterization being developed within the scene. In the past episode within the Dragon's Labyrinth, we know that Agott learned how to work well with Coco. That was in a drastic scenario. In more familiar scenery, we see them sharing a living space with one another and not being completely opposed to each other. Coco has always wanted to grow closer to Agott as a fellow apprentice, but the barrier of entry for her was the experience and knowledge of being a witch. There was an injustice in Agott's eyes to Coco, an outsider, becoming an apprentice so easily. However, now that Coco has been through a couple of very taxing scenarios in which she implemented her knowledge of magic well, there's some leeway in their growing friendship. Coincidentally, when we look at the foreshadowing in this scene, there's a very simple message here in this episode. Agott has been working on a specific spell to help her. She says that after she proves herself by developing it properly, she'd be more capable to take on a test of apprentices. The anime shows Agott chasing these milestones very adamantly. It shows her conducting this light a few times, definitely piquing interest in this short-term accomplishment, but also begging curiosity to how far down this path the story will navigate. Her habit of pushing others away has to do with accomplishment. Meanwhile, she holds herself to her own standards and wants to push past these limits and become accomplished faster. If we take a look at the wider picture, we've been primarily following Coco with their test of courage and such. Now there's this tiny subplot of Agott being that she is the most developed character behind Coco right alongside Qifrey. Speaking of the master himself, Qifrey left the entire anime community speechless with his magical performance and his attitude in the end credits. When we start getting along in the atelier this week, he has returned to the serene side of himself that we are far more familiar with. Looking at this episode from a regular perspective, you would title the former half of it a picnic out in the fields around the house. Nothing much should be particularly expected. Again, I believe the pacing is intentional. The original author of Witch Hat Atelier knew how to develop characters without saying it outright. The directors of the anime knew how to get this point across in the video format. Every moment that Qifrey spends happy and wondrous, the audience feels floaty and cared for. Every moment that Qifrey spends distressed and scary, the audience feels betrayed in some sense. These episodes, especially the second one where exposition made up a good portion of the runtime, is explicitly made to formulate an aura about a character. Coco seems afraid but ready. Agott seems stuck up and tense. Qifrey throughout the whole series has been made to look like a good teacher. There's only key moments where he seems desperate, either to do or see something. Creating this awkward atmosphere around a character where the audience feels confused is hard to do, at least in a way that makes logical sense. Everything that Qifrey has done is easily explainable with a blanket statement. When he saved Coco from her home, he was curious about the picture book. When he is gently showing her the kind side to magic, he is passionate about the craft. When he spooks Noah, he wants to get first try at the brimmed caps himself. We can make the assumption that Qifrey has personal strife with the brimmed caps. We don't know what that may be, but he is willing to break precedents to get any closer to their whereabouts. In a way, we see this selfish side to him. Despite this, he still cares about the fundamental whimsy of magic and his apprentices and friends. He is more than just a two-sided character. Qifrey is multifaceted multifaceted alongside many of the other people in this show. Another instance of foreshadowing that is a bit more complex than Agott's aspirations is Olruggio's concerns. He is introduced into the setting as a straight-laced individual. Immediately upon hearing about Coco's circumstances, he attempts to take her away to the Knights Moralis. He rationalizes it by saying that he doesn't want to deal with the Brimcaps again. So, there's some obvious history now. Qifrey prevents Olruggio from proceeding forward, saying that he'll even turn his magic against his own dear friend if he has to. Olruggio seems genuinely shaken by this, so he assumes there's some great importance to Coco, which, given what we know, there is, at least to Qifrey's sake. These big confrontations followed by conversation around the fireplace give us some key details, not only about Olruggio, but about Qifrey as well. We know that Qifrey has some definite history with the Brimcaps. However, now Olruggio has admitted to having some tied to them in the past as well. He introduced himself as the Watchful Eye, yet that is not the only connection that he has to Qifrey. In their interactions, he called him his dear friend, and knowing what we know about our mentor character, this is definitely intriguing given past interactions. One of these moments is when Qifrey visited the underwater enclave of witches. There he meets Elira, who also seems to know our mentor fairly well, enough to joke around about the old days at least. In a shop out in town, Elira asks Qifrey about returning to the Great Hall and bringing all of his apprentices along, if not just for convenience. Qifrey responds in a very serious tone. He wants it to be known that it's not a joking matter. He prefers the serenity and privacy of his own atelier. Becoming Qifrey's friend might or might not be an easy task, but becoming a dear friend is a whole new hurdle and brick wall. In that sense, I'm willing to say that Olruggio and Qifrey have known each other for a long time and are talking about the same Brimcap incident. From what we can tell, the Brimcaps rarely show up at all, and now that Qifrey has a certain lead, he couldn't let her go. That was what led to this confrontation. Moving forward, we know that Olruggio is at least reasonable enough to hear out Qifrey, but in that same way, it's because they're close friends. This whole incident, the inciting and the one from the past, are growing larger as the series gets along. The pattern for the story is to keep piling these incidents on top of one another until they directly need to be addressed. This foreshadowing is looming far and wide. In the anime, we just don't know the scale of it yet. Anyways, that's all from me. Thank you everyone for your comments on the latest videos, especially the ones correcting me on pronunciation and certain misgendering. I want to attempt to make my videos the best they can be, and that is also in terms of factual matter. If you can please support this video the best you can, I'd appreciate it greatly. Thank you very much for watching. See you all later, you cool people.